All right. Parshas Vayigash, this is the Dvar Malchut. This was a speech that the Lubavitcher Rebbe gave in 1992. I don't know, maybe it's 1991, I guess. It was like now, right? 1991. Dover Pamim Rabos, we spoke many times. Shekol Inyanim, Amosivim b'Torah, everything that Amasuparim, which are told in the Torah, and the word Torah means teaching. Mechilim b'tocham, they have eternal meaning, eternal lessons. L'kol echad ve'echad Yisrael, to each and every Jew, u'l'kol Yisrael, and for every Jew, b'kol zaman, in every time. B'kol in every place, or b'kol matzav, in any situation. Horos kololios, these are general teachings, v'gam horos ka'elu, and also teachings that are fit for mitzavim miyuchadim, for even special times, v'hashonim shel oto zaman, in that time, u'makom mesuyam, bo nimtza Yehudi. The Torah contains teachings for every situation, for every person, for every time, for every place. Kamokein, similarly, that's what the Torah is, the section, the reading of the week that we read, that we're supposed to live with the reading, the Torah reading every week. Vayigash alav Yehuda, that Yehuda, like we just finished explaining, Yehuda, he approached Yosef. Shemimenu yeshno hora nitzchit, there must be some sort of an eternal teaching. Amavhira v'notenet lehavin, which gives us to understand our service of God and the service of every Jew for our present time. And namely, what's so special about our present time? Here, the Rebbe said this was 30 years ago. Maybe it's not relevant anymore. It says the Rebbe, how much more it's relevant right now. It's eternally relevant. Now especially, these are the last moments of exile. And we are right next to the first seconds of redemption, like we spend many, many times. Remember last week we talked about this. The first glance, the connection of our Torah reading, Vayigash alav Yehuda, with the future redemption, is in the Haftorah of the Shabbos. Remember we learned last week, the Haftorah, beautiful, telling all the Haftorahs are saying basically the same thing, right? Micha says, Ovadia says, Zechariah says. Last week it was Zechariah. Excuse me. How God, how the whole world is going to turn to God. Nevertheless, God is going to show the world how the Jews are the special people. Oh, there we go. In this week's Torah is talking about the in this week's Torah, the Haftorah is talking about the unification between Yehuda and Yosef in the future. So this week's Torah portion is Yecheskel. The person is the prophet Ezekiel. We'll see next. We'll see. Like it says, Kach lecha eitz echad, take one piece of wood. God says through the prophet Ezekiel, he's saying to the prophet Ezekiel, take one piece of wood, and write on the other one Yehuda, and take another piece of wood and write on it Yosef. Write on it Yosef. And put them one next to the other, and they'll become one piece of wood. This is what God says. I'm taking the Jewish people from among the Goyim. Asher hol chusham. I'm taking. Now, what is this talking about? The only time the Jews have been spread among all the nations is now, right after the second temple. So he's prophesied in the second temple. I'm going to take all the Jews that they're all scattered over there, the kibatzti otam, and I'm going to gather them together, misaviv, vasitam legoy echad, and they'll become one nation. From here also they learn that there's the 10 tribes are going to be gathered up. God is going to, nobody has any idea who they are. Everybody thinks they do, but they don't. Umelech echad, there'll be one king for all of them. But David Avdi, and David, my servant, Nasi Le'em, will be a king for them forever. A king, a leader, a president, whatever, forever. The Yad'u, a Goyim, and the nations will know, Ki ani Avaya, that I am a God. That's what the prophecy of Ezekiel says this week. But Nosaf Lakach, in addition to this, Shaftoros Mivatot, that the Haftorah expresses only the connection to the redemption of Israel. This is not telling us exactly what we're supposed to do in order to bring this redemption. Now, there's many cases where God takes the prophets, his prophets, and he tells them to do something which seems to have nothing to do with, in those days, there was no television, there was no videos, he didn't take a picture and everybody saw what was going on. God just told him to do this privately. Nobody saw it, but this is the prophecy. And he's saying you're gathering it together. And okay, now just one small thing. After King Solomon died, so the kingdom of the Jewish people split. And there were 10 tribes that split off. They didn't like King Solomon's son. King Solomon's son was called Rechavam, and they didn't like him. And so God sent a prophet, Achai Shiloni, to Yerovam ben Nevat. It ended up being a disaster. And Yerovam ben Nevat took 10 tribes, and those 10 tribes became the nation of Israel, Yisrael. And the lower 2 tribes, which was Benjamin and Yehuda, and eventually Benjamin sort of got swallowed up in Yehuda, that was the tribe of what was called Yehuda. And they were separated. That's it. From the beginning, after a few years of the second temple, 30 years, whatever it is, into the second temple, into the first temple. Into the first temple. King Solomon built the first temple, and it was stood there until he passed away. I think it was I have to look it up. Like 40 years later, he passed away, let's say. And then from then on till the end of the second temple, from then on, the kingdom of Israel was separated. 10 of the tribes got taken into imprisonment. No one ever saw them again. No one has any idea where they are. Everybody has ideas where they are, but nobody knows for sure. Where are these 10 tribes? You have to remember, this is like 2,700 years ago, long time ago, right? This is a long time ago that it happened, 2,700 to 2,800 years ago. So even if there are these 10 lost tribes, right, that's 2,700 years ago, it's a pretty long time, and they didn't have any laws, they didn't have any, okay. So in the future, God is going to gather all these people together. Now these 10 lost tribes, they come all from the one who instigated it, the one who was the king, Yerovam ben Nevat. He was from the tribe of Ephraim. From Yosef. So the upper 10 tribes, sometimes that's called Ephraim. They're called Ephraim, sometimes they're called Yosef. Those are the upper 10 tribes. And the lower 2, that's Yehuda. So they became split. The whole kingdom of Israel became split. So God is saying, don't worry about it. Nowadays, all of the Jews are all going to gather together. They're going to be one again. I'm going to bring back those 10 tribes. They're going to all come back to Israel, and the temple will draw them all together. We'll see. We have to understand. So first of all, that this Haftorah that we read this week from Yechezkel, it doesn't explain anything about what we're supposed to do. It just says that there's going to be a thing like this. But what are we supposed to do? Also, in the Haftorah itself, we have to understand. It says, Vayigash alav Yehuda. It says in our Torah portion, how does it start off? That Yehuda comes close to Yosef. Yehuda comes close to Yosef. Yehuda is the idea of Moshiach. Like we said, that's going to be the temple, the third temple. And Yosef, that represents the other 10 tribes, that they're subordinate. They're second. That's like the tabernacle. In our Torah portion, Yehuda is the subordinate one. Yehuda, he's the number 2. Yosef is ruling over the world, and Yehuda has to come close to Yosef. But in the future redemption, it's going to be the other way around. Yehuda is going to be the Mashiach, and the rest of the world, they're going to come to him. So it seems to be the opposite. In our Torah portion, it's exactly the opposite of David Abdi Nasi Aleim La'olam. what it says that King David, he's going to be the ruler of all the Jews forever. Shari Ba'Gashes Yehuda, when Yehuda comes close to Yosef, in general, it's expressed how it is that Yosef, he's the Balabite, he's the master. Yosef, in our Torah portion, Yosef, he's the king of the whole world. He's second to the king of Egypt. And Yehuda, he's like nothing. He has to come in and beg from Yosef. Yehuda, he's number two. He has to come close to Yosef. Yehuda comes close to Yosef. And Yehuda, he has to request that he should release Benjamin. He says, please, my master. Yehuda says that Yosef is my master. That you are important. Yehuda says to Yosef, in my eyes, you're like a king. Since the Paro, because Paro gave Yosef to be the leader of all the land of Egypt. And except for Yosef, Yosef was ruling the whole world. Ubafran is Paro. Parsha, it says, Paro, it says he was a Moshel Bekipo. Paro, it says he was the leader of the whole world. And that's the topic of our Torah portion, which is not the case in the future, which that's what the Haftorah is talking about. Then it says that Yehuda will be above. Yehuda, he'll be above Yosef. Yehuda, he's going to be the Melech Moshiach. It's going to be one king that's going to be for all of them. My servant David from Yehuda, he's going to be the king of everyone. David Nasi, he'll be the ruler forever. So what's going on? In the Torah portion, Yosef is the king. But in the Haftorah, the king, the Mashiach, he's going to come from Yehuda. He's going to be the king. And our Torah portion is Yehuda he's groveling before Yosef. Please release my brother. Yehuda is like nothing. And Yosef is the king. But in the future, it's going to be the opposite. Yehuda, he's going to be the king. So it seems to be the two opposite things. What's going on? And what is this? What's the lesson it's telling us? Yuvans that we can understand by, first of all, connecting the beginning of this week's Torah portion with the end. Like we did many times. And according to the general principle that we just finished learning in the Torah or, the last thing is in the beginning, and the beginning is in the end. There's a special connection between the beginning and the end of the Torah portion, and the beginning and the end of everything. Also, we also have to explain. The Siyama Parsha in the end of this week's Torah portion, it writes, Vayeshev Yisrael be'eretz Mitzrayim be'eretz Goshen ve'yechazu bo ve'yifru b'yarbu ma'od. It says in the end of this week's Torah portion that the Jewish people were in the land of Egypt, that Paro gave them tremendous honor. Yosef was the king of the world, and the Jewish people went into Egypt, and the place was very, very successful. Shazem Mara al Tokef Shel Yaakov Ubana. This shows on the power and the blessing that Yaakov and his sons had. Shafilu biyosem be'eretz Mitzrayim, even when they were in the land of Egypt, Shetachas Shelton Paro, they were under the rulership of Paro. Omer Paro said, "Call Tova Oretz Tuv, call Eretz Mitzrayim Lechemu. Take the best of the land, wherever you want to. Take anything you want to. Right? You saved Egypt. You saved the whole world. You lifted Egypt to be the highest power in the world. You did it, Yosef. If it wasn't for you, we'd all be dead now. We'd all be dead from hunger. Therefore, Yosef, take whatever you want to. And it says they took the best part of the land. It says Eretz Goshen they took. It says that the Jews took the land and they were very, very successful and fruitful. The Umatzos, on the other hand, Vayigash of Yehuda, in the beginning of the Torah portion, Madgish says that Yehuda and his brothers, they are the worst situation that Jews have ever been in. They have to beg Yosef. And just think about it. All of the leaders of the Jewish people, all of them, without exception, right? The heads of the Jewish people, they were all in prison. Never been a thing like that. All the Jewish people in prison, even the Holocaust, whatever it was, all the Jewish people were in prison. Maybe something like the second the destruction. But here the second destruction, at least Jews were spread around. Here all the brothers were all concentrated together. and they were under the power of Yosef. They were the lowest of the low. Hainu El Shabu Balabai, because Yosef, he was the leader, he was the ruler over the whole land of Egypt. This was before Yosef confessed to his brothers. He revealed himself to his brothers. This is the opposite of what it says in the end of the Torah portion. Okay, what's the Rebbe talking about over here? The Torah is teaching us how to live our lives. The Torah is telling us what's really important in life. What's really important in life is to bring the future redemption. That's what's important to us, and that's what's stressed in the in the Haftorah of this week's Torah portion. The Haftorah is that God is telling the prophet Ezekiel that one day the Jewish people are going to be united, and they're all going to be joined to the Moshiach. Moshiach is going to come from Yehuda, and the Moshiach is going to come, and he's going to be the king of all of them, and the world is going to be a wonderful place. Good. Says, but okay, what does that tell us about how to serve God? What's it? And not only that, and the Haftorah, this portion about Yehuda be the leader and joining all the Jews, this is the opposite of this Torah portion. The Torah portion we're learning is that Yehuda was the lowest of the low. He was under total control of Yosef and his friends. They were begging for their lives. Right? Yehuda was the lowest. In the Haftorah, it says Yehuda is going to be the highest, is going to be the Mashiach. Here he's the lowest. And even more, the beginning of this week's Torah portion seems to be the opposite of the end of this week's Torah portion. At the end of the Torah portion, everything is wonderful. In the beginning, everything is terrible. The main question the Rebbe is asking is, what does this teach us? The Torah can say whatever it wants to, right? The Torah can do whatever it wants to. The question is, what are we supposed to learn from this? Like this, even though the at first glance it seems that Yehuda is coming close to Yosef. This expresses the power of Yosef. Yosef is the leader of all of Egypt. The Yehuda is the Kukalav, and how Yehuda, he is totally dependent on Yosef. But if you think about this, if you contemplate, you'll see that it's a little bit different. Yehuda, we can see that Yehuda, he did not come and grovel, like I said before. He wasn't begging for his life. He was on all fours, crying and weeping. We see exactly the opposite. That Yehuda, in one way, was more powerful. He demonstrated more power and courage than Yosef did. Yosef, he was then, he ruled over the whole world. Without Yosef, no one could lift up their hand or their foot in the land of Israel. You couldn't get on your horse without Yosef. You had to have an okay. And especially that Paro was then, he said he ruled the whole world. And Yosef was just like Paro. He ruled the whole world. And Yehuda even said it. Nevertheless, we see that what did Yehuda do? Yehuda, without knowing that this was, he didn't know that it was his brother. Yehuda was not afraid at all. And he conducted himself with the Rechava. He conducted like, Yehuda acted like he was the king. He didn't even ask, we request permission from Yosef. Nigashul Yosef. That's how the parsha starts out. Vayigashalav. That Yehuda stepped forward. He didn't say, may I have permission? He raised up his hand, please, can I have permission to say something? He just immediately jumped forward to Yosef with Tokef. And he said, Kashot, he spoke to him, how do you say, powerfully. Therefore, he heard, he said, Al Yicharav Decha. He said, please don't get mad at me. But he said to Yosef, don't get mad at me. Why would he think to get mad? Because he was yelling at him. He put himself into tremendous danger. Yosef, because Yosef could have killed him in 1 second. And the chutzpah, you jumped toward the king. He had all these guards around him, bodyguards, soldiers, policemen, all over the place. Yehuda didn't have anything. He didn't have any weapons. They could have killed him in an instant. That was their job. What did they care? And Yehuda jumped forward. He could have said, please, can I just say something? Can I have your permission? Please tell your men the right to put down their guns for 1 second, their knives. I'll stand right here. I won't come close. Let me just please make my plea. He didn't say that. Yehuda jumped forward. Yigash, I love Yehuda. Yehuda jumped forward and he started yelling at Yosef, please don't get angry at me, but this is my brother. I'm standing. I'm not going to stand down. So if so, we see that Yosef caused Yehuda to reveal a power inside of himself, which was even greater than the power that Yosef had. A power of defiance. Yosef did not have to defy anything. Yehuda was defying the whole entire world. Yosef was the king of the whole entire world. He was defying the king of the world. According to this, now we can understand the connection between Vayigash Alav Yehuda to the power and the strength, the courage of the Jewish people in the land of Israel, in the land of Egypt, in the end of the Torah portion. Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz Mizraim be'eretz Goshen v'yachazu bo v'yifru b'mod. Now we can understand why the end of this week's Torah portion speaks about how good it was and beneficial it was for the Jews. Yehuda, and also what it says that how Yehuda is in the Haftorah. It says that Yehuda he's going to be the leader all over the Jews. That's the Moshiach. This is what's going to be like. It says Vayigash Alav Yehuda. We can say that this power of Vayigash Alav Yehuda, this gave the power afterwards that Yaakov and his sons could come down to Egypt in such a way. What happened? When Yosef saw the power of his brother, and then eventually Yosef admits to his brother that I am Yosef, I'm the one you sold into Egypt, right? And so this set the stage, and it broke all the fear in Egypt. Yosef now knew that his brothers, they weren't, afraid of him. They weren't afraid of anything. And because of that, when they came down to Egypt afterward, this gave the power for Yaakov and all of his sons to come down also into Egypt. We're going to see this in this week's Torah portion. Yaakov, he cries. Not that they'll be under the rulership of Egypt, but exactly the opposite. When they come into the land of Egypt, they will come down as rulers. That they'll grab a hold, they'll take possession of the land of Egypt, and they'll succeed and make it grow very much, and even more. That this is going to be the preparation. This is the preparation for David Avdi, for Mashiach coming and ruling over the Jewish people, as we're going to learn. In other words, it's teaching us our attitude. We have to have an attitude of defiance. Nothing in the world should even begin to make us afraid or worried or depressed, or we have to be the bosses over the world, and not that the world is bosses over us. Of course, when it says we're supposed to be bosses over the world, we mean according to make the whole world, bring the whole world to believe in the creator of the universe. That's what we're supposed to do. But not to be intimidated by anyone, especially by our own thoughts. As we're going to talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. Let's just learn the Yom Yom here. Excuse me. It's customary that one is not davening when you say Hallel. Right now, in the days of it's Rosh Chodesh now. It happens to be it's also Chanukah, so this is not really so relevant. But when we say the half Hallel, so we also say the blessings even on the days. We also say the blessing before and afterwards. When we finish, we say Al. Tefillin should be worn, but then we take our tefillin off before Musaf. But the daily Torah lessons are studied even after the entire service. Okay, this is the 6th day of Hanukkah. No, this is what's going on over here in 1 minute. Sunday, the first day of Tevet. Yeah, that's right. This is what it is. Okay, this is today's Yom Yom. This is talking about certain customs that we have when we in the prayers. We'll talk more, God willing, tomorrow. 3:00 will be a class in Chumash. Have a good day with Mashiach now.